My daughter said she wanted to protect me, but I found her cashing out my bonds and house deeds at the bank. Have you ever woken up in the morning and realized the quiet around you isn't peace, it's absence? That's how most of my days begin. My name is Arthur Mallory. I'm 79 years old, a retired auditor, and I've lived in Savannah, Georgia all my life. 3 years ago, I lost my wife Margaret to cancer. 56 years together, and then silence. She had a laugh that could brighten a whole room. Now it's just the creak of the house and the hum of the refrigerator. I still keep her picture on the nightstand. Some nights I whisper goodnight to her and imagine she answers back. My house sits by the river. It isn't just a house. It's a symbol of every late night, every penny pinched, every careful choice Margaret and I ever made. We bought it in the early 1970s when Savannah was still small. Back then, it cost a fraction of what it's worth now. Today, realtors tell me it's valued at over $2.5 million. To me, it's priceless. It holds her perfume in the curtains and her laughter in the walls. I've always been careful with money. Not stingy, just precise. My profession demanded it, and frankly, life rewarded it. Margaret used to tease me, calling me an auditor to the bone. That prudence meant we retired without debt, meant our daughter went to college, meant we traveled when we wanted. It also meant I could build a safety net, a deposit box at First Savannah Trust Bank, containing close to $1 million in bonds, $250,000 in cash, and Margaret's jewelry. Pieces meant for our daughter one day, if she proved she could value them. Our daughter Vivian is 48 now. She works as a logistics manager, married to Clinton Hayes, a man I've never fully trusted. He's 52, an insurance broker, who lives as though he earns far more than he does. The two of them visit me on schedule every second Saturday between 11 and 1. Punctual, polite, predictable. But last month, something changed. Vivian swept in, wearing a dress too expensive for her salary, hair-tinted honey blonde perfume heavy enough to choke. She hugged me with arms that felt more rehearsed than warm. "Daddy, you're thinner," she said, tilting her head, eyes darting around the room. "Are you eating well?" I nodded, though I could feel her gaze moving past me, scanning the furniture, the photographs, the desk in the corner. Clinton followed, tall frame, stuffed into a navy suit, bald patch, hidden with careful combing. He shook my hand harder than usual, smiling that strained smile of his. "Beautiful morning, isn't it, Arthur?" I had already set out tea and biscuits. A ritual. Margaret believed in hospitality, so I keep it alive. Vivian began fussing, rearranging cups as though my hands were suddenly incompetent. "Daddy, you shouldn't work so hard. Let me hire a cleaning lady for you." "I manage just fine," I replied. "Movement keeps me alive." "But wouldn't it be easier if you moved in with us? We have a guest room, remember?" It was the same song I'd heard before. Only this time Clinton leaned forward, voice syrupy. "Arthur, think about it. A house this big for one man, overkill. If you sold it, you'd have a fortune to fall back on." "And what would happen to that money?" I asked flatly. "Well, obviously, it would stay with you," he said, laughing too loud, eyes shifting. That was when I noticed it, the glance between them. Quick, sharp, unspoken words flying across the room. I've spent my life reading balance sheets and spotting discrepancies. People are easier than numbers. And what I saw was intent. Then Clinton asked almost casually, "You keep your money safe, don't you, Arthur? I hear scammers target seniors. Maybe I could recommend better funds. Higher yields, less risk. Which bank do you use again?" "First Savannah Trust." I answered evenly. "Been with them for decades." His eyes flickered. Not bad, but not the best. Have you thought about moving your assets or maybe cash? Surely you don't keep cash in a deposit box. I smiled thinly. Old habits, a few bonds, some cash, Margaret's keepsakes, another glance between them. This one tighter, more deliberate. A shiver crawled up my spine. After they left in their silver Mercedes one I knew their income couldn't justify, I sat at my desk, staring at Margaret's photograph. Something's wrong, Maggie, I whispered. And I don't like it. I had no idea just how right I was. I wonder where are you listening to my story right now? In a small town, a big city, maybe even another country. Leave me a comment and tell me, I'd love to know. The morning after Vivian and Clinton's visit, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, the steam curling upward like a warning I couldn't yet read. The teacups and plates they had used were still stacked in the sink. Normally I wash dishes right away. Margaret taught me that habits are a kind of discipline, but I'd left them there overnight. Maybe part of me wanted to see if the smell of her lavender soap could cover up the bitter perfume Vivian left behind. It didn't. I pulled out the folder where I keep my records. Margaret used to laugh at how precise I was, but it's that very precision that built our life. Every bank statement, tax return, investment receipt, all filed, labeled neat. I flipped through the pages, checking balances, verifying signatures. Everything was there, nothing missing. On paper, all was well. But my gut told a different story. By the afternoon, I found the first real crack. A letter from First Savannah Trust Bank lay in the mail stack. At first glance, it looked routine, but when I slid it open, my chest tightened. Notification of request for duplicate key. Dated 2 days earlier, apparently someone had requested a second key to my deposit box. I set the letter down slowly. My hands trembled not from age this time, but from fury. I had never asked for such a thing. Only 2 people knew I kept cash and bonds in that box, me, and now, unfortunately, Vivian and Clinton. That night I stood in my study staring at Margaret's photo. Her eyes always seemed to say, "Arthur, trust your instincts." I whispered back, "They're planning something, Maggie. Our own daughter." My throat burned as I said it aloud. The next morning I walked into my office. Something felt off. The papers on my desk weren't aligned as I'd left them. A drawer slightly ajar. My ledger book had a crease on a page I hadn't opened in weeks. To anyone else, these details would be invisible, but not to me. I'd spent a lifetime spotting the one misplaced digit in a sea of numbers, and I knew someone had been in my home. I checked the locks untouched. That left only one explanation. Vivian had her own key. I had given her 1 year ago after Margaret passed, telling myself it was practical in case of emergency. Now it felt like I'd handed her the very knife she intended to use against me. That afternoon I made a phone call. Not to Vivian, not to Clinton, to a security company. The technician arrived the next day, young with tattooed forearms and an easy smile. He carried boxes of cameras and motion sensors. "Expecting burglars, sir?" he asked, drilling a hole near the study door. "Not burglars," I said flatly. "Family." His eyes softened, but he didn't press further. He just installed the equipment, no questions asked. With the cameras humming quietly, I began writing notes in a small leather-bound journal. Dates, times, details of every strange glance, every unusual question, every slip of paper out of place. If I'd learned anything from auditing, it was this: evidence wins arguments, not feelings. Still, the hardest evidence came that week. Another envelope from the bank arrived, this one thicker. It contained forms, authorization documents with my name typed neatly across the top. My supposed request for a replacement key. And at the bottom, a shaky scrawl of my signature. I sat there staring at it for a long time. It was my name, yes, but not my hand. Whoever had forged it didn't realize I know my own writing the way a pianist knows each note by touch. The loops were wrong. The pressure was uneven. And the date, on the very Saturday. Vivian and Clinton had been in my home. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my journal. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was fact. That night, I walked from room to room, double-checking the locks, testing the cameras, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The house Margaret and I had built with love and sweat now felt like enemy territory. I could almost hear her voice. Kindness doesn't mean weakness, Arthur. I stood by the window watching the river shimmer under the moonlight, and I made myself a promise. If they were bold enough to come for what was mine, I would not stop them with pleading. I would stop them with proof, and for the first time since Margaret died, I felt something stir inside me. Not grief, not despair, but the following Monday, I carried my umbrella and walked to First Savannah Trust Bank. The rain was steady, dripping from the Spanish moss along the streets, as though the whole city were whispering warnings I hadn't wanted to hear. I went through the usual ritual, checked my accounts, balanced the figures, then asked to see my deposit box. The contents were intact bundles of bonds wrapped in crisp sleeves, envelopes of cash, and the velvet case holding Margaret's pearls. Still, my mind wouldn't quiet. I left the vault, uneasy, my instincts scratching like nails at the back of my skull. As I prepared to leave, a young teller, a kid with sandy hair and the kind of earnest eyes you only see before life hardens them, approached me. His name tag read, "Caleb Monroe, Mr. Mallory," he said quietly. "Could I speak with you?" Off the record. I hesitated, but something in his tone reminded me of my younger self. Cautious, precise, unwilling to look away when numbers didn't add up. I nodded. We stepped into a side office. I don't know if I should even say this, Caleb began, lowering his voice. But I saw something last week that bothered me. A man met with one of our employees, Mr. Parkerfield. They were discussing safety deposit boxes. I overheard your name. My breath caught. What man? Tall, heavy-set, expensive suit. He introduced himself as your son-in-law. Said his name was Clinton Hayes. I felt the blood drain from my face. And you're certain? Caleb nodded. Absolutely. He even mentioned that his wife, your daughter, was entitled to your assets eventually. So why wait? Parkerfield told him everything would be ready by Friday. Sir, I know it's not my place, but I watched my grandmother lose her savings to something similar. I can't just keep quiet. I gripped his shoulder. You did the right thing, son. More than you know. That evening back home, I checked my new cameras. The footage from Saturday chilled me, Vivian unlocking the door with her spare key, Clinton close behind. They moved directly into my office, rifled through drawers, lingered at my desk. Vivian slid documents into her purse. Clinton pocketed something I couldn't make out. 20 minutes later, they left a note on the front door, pretending they'd simply stopped by to visit. I sat in my chair watching the recording again and again, fury rising with each replay. My own daughter. my own flesh and blood. I called Eleanor Jameson, the bank's manager, a woman in her early 60s who'd been with the institution longer than most of her staff had been alive. I trusted her steady voice. "Eleanor," I said, "we need to talk. Off the books." The next morning, we met in her office. I showed her the duplicate key notice, the forged signature, even paused the camera footage on Vivian's hand, reaching into my drawer. Eleanor's face tightened. "This is serious," she said. "If Parkerfield is involved, we're looking at internal corruption. And if your family is complicit, they are." I cut in sharply. "I know the truth now." She leaned forward. "Then we'll need law enforcement. Detective Morales is discreet. He handles financial crimes for Chatham County." That afternoon, Morales visited my home. Stocky, late 50s with salt and pepper hair and the weary eyes of a man who's seen too many betrayals. I handed him the letters, the video footage, and Caleb's statement written in my own careful script. He flipped through each page slowly, methodically. "Mr. Mallory," he said, "finally, this isn't suspicion anymore. It's conspiracy. They're preparing to forge a power of attorney, gain access to your assets, and if the paperwork I'm hearing about is real, declare you mentally unfit." I swallowed hard. Even expecting it, hearing the words out loud cut like glass. "So what do we do?" Morales leaned back, crossing his arms. "We set a trap. You'll let them think you're oblivious that their plan is working. Meanwhile, we'll be watching. The moment they try to touch that deposit box, we'll catch them red-handed." I looked over at Margaret's picture on my desk, her smile forever frozen in sunlight at Tybee Island. "Kindness doesn't mean weakness," she used to say. For years, I'd tried to believe my daughter's intentions were good. But no more. "I'll do it." I told Morales, my voice firm. "If my own daughter has chosen greed over blood, then let her walk into the snare she built for herself." That night, I slept with the lights on the camera feed flickering across my phone screen. Somewhere deep inside, grief had burned itself into something sharper resolve. Friday came heavy with clouds, the kind that hang low as if the sky itself knows trouble is brewing. I dressed carefully that morning, polished shoes, pressed jacket, the same navy tie Margaret had given me for our last Christmas together. If I was going to face betrayal, I would do it standing tall, not shuffling like some helpless old man. A cab dropped me at the service entrance of First Savannah Trust Bank just after 8:30. Eleanor Jameson, the bank manager, was already there, her silver hair pulled into a bun, her face tight with worry. Beside her stood Detective Morales, his coat collar turned up against the drizzle, and two plainclothes officers. "Ready?" Mr. Mallory Morales asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I answered. My voice surprised me. It carried more steel than I felt. They led me to a small office adjacent to the vault. Through a narrow viewing window and a bank of monitors, I would see everything. The plan was simple: let them act, let them incriminate themselves, and then intervene. At 9 sharp, the bank opened its doors. Customers trickled in, an old couple depositing checks, a young mother with a toddler clinging to her leg. All normal, almost comforting. But I knew my daughter's steps would soon echo in that marble lobby. And at 10:15, they did. Vivian walked in first, her heels clicking confidently against the floor. She wore a tailored gray suit that looked far too expensive, her hair pulled back sleek, her eyes sharp with anticipation. Clinton followed, a leather folder tucked under his arm, sweat shining faintly on his forehead despite the cool air. Mr. Parkerfield, the banker, greeted them as though they were honored guests. I clenched my fists at the sight. My daughter smiled a smile that once warmed my heart, now twisted into something cold and calculating. From the monitor, I heard Parkerfield's voice. "Everything is ready. The paperwork looks authentic. As soon as we access the box, it's yours." He handed Clinton a stack of documents. My eyes burned as I read the words on the screen, power of attorney. My name signed at the bottom, notarized by someone on their payroll. It was my handwriting, but not. The loops, the slant, all just close enough to fool someone who didn't know me. Vivian laughed softly. "Daddy has no idea. He thinks Clinton and I are picking him up for a doctor's appointment." I felt the sting of betrayal sharper than any arthritis in my bones. Clinton slid the forged papers back into the folder. "Once this is done, we can transfer the deeds. The house alone will cover our debts. And the cash." His eyes gleamed. More than enough to start over. Parkerfield produced a small brass key. Together they moved to the heavy steel drawers of the vault. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought Morales might hear it through the wall. The box slid open with a metallic groan. Inside lay the life Margaret and I had built, nearly $1 million in bonds, $250,000 in crisp bills, and the jewelry Margaret had treasured. Clinton's hands trembled as he lifted an envelope, grinning. "This is it," he whispered. Vivian leaned closer, her voice cool. "By tonight the house will be ours too. And Daddy..." She paused, smirking. "Well, the papers say he isn't fit to make decisions anymore. A nursing home in Florida is waiting. Out of sight, out of mind." That was enough. Morales gave a quick signal. The vault door burst open, and the two plainclothes officers strode in, badges raised. Police step away from the box. Clinton froze, still clutching the envelope of cash. Parkerfield went pale, his knees buckling. Vivian spun around, her face draining of color, when she saw me step into the room behind the officers. "Daddy," she stammered, her voice breaking. I met her eyes, Margaret's eyes, but hollowed by greed. "I wanted to see for myself," I said. "And now I have." Clinton tried to recover, pasting on a desperate smile. "Arthur, you don't understand. We were just trying to protect you, manage things before. Before what I cut him off. Before I died, before you locked me away like luggage in a storage unit." Vivian's tears spilled, but I felt nothing. For years I'd longed for her embrace, her kindness. Now all I saw was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Detective Morales' voice rang steady. "Vivian Hayes, Clinton Hayes, Bradley Parkerfield. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. You have the right to remain silent." The officers cuffed them one by one. Parkerfield muttered something about debts, Clinton shouted protests, and Vivian sobbed, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I stood rooted, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from release. The truth was no longer hidden in shadows. It was here, plain, undeniable. And as the officers led them away, I whispered under my breath more to Margaret than to anyone else. "You were right, Maggie. Kindness doesn't mean weakness. Not anymore." The vault still smelled faintly of ink and metal, like every bank I'd ever worked in during my long career. But that morning, it smelled like betrayal. Papers lay scattered across the polished table, my forged signature glaring up at me, stacks of bonds and envelopes of cash, half spilled like the entrails of a life I'd spent decades protecting. Vivian turned toward me, mascara streaking her cheeks. Daddy, please, this isn't what it looks like. Her voice cracked on the word daddy, a word that used to melt my heart when she was a little girl asking for ice cream on River Street. Now it felt like a weapon. I took one step closer, leaning on the cane I rarely used, but had brought today. It looks exactly like what it is, I said quietly. My daughter and her husband caught stealing from me, planning to bury me alive in some nursing home while they pocketed my life's work. Clinton straightened, trying to find that salesman's charm he wore like a second skin. His cuffs clicked as Morales tightened them, but he still grinned. Arthur, listen, we were only trying to manage your finances. You know, protect the estate. You're not getting any younger. I laughed, then a sharp, bitter sound that startled even me. Manage, protect, you forged my signature, Clinton. You broke into my home. You plotted with a corrupt banker to strip me of everything Margaret and I built. That isn't protection. That's plunder. Vivian lunged forward, only to be held back by one of the officers. Daddy, stop. Please stop. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Clinton has debts, and the house, our house. My voice rose for the first time. That house by the river was bought with sweat, with sacrifice. Your mother skipped meals to save for the down payment. I worked nights auditing ledgers until my eyes blurred. That house is not yours, Vivian. It never was. Her face twisted, tears mixing with fury. So what, Daddy? You'd rather die in that mausoleum alone, clutching your bonds and cash, than help your own daughter, than help your grandchildren have a chance at something better. The words hit me like stones, but I refused to flinch. You've mistaken money for love, I said softly. Your mother gave you everything: patience, faith, compassion. I thought some of that had stuck, but standing here looking at you now, I see nothing of her in you. Clinton shifted, his smug mask slipping. This is ridiculous. We can settle this privately. Drop the charges, Arthur. Think of the scandal. Think of what people will say when they hear you had your own daughter arrested. Detective Morales cut in, his tone clipped. What people will say doesn't matter. What matters is the law. And the law says you three committed a crime. Vivian shook her head violently, hair falling loose from its neat bun. Daddy, please don't do this. If you send us to jail, you'll regret it. You'll die alone and no one will come to your funeral. Is that what you want? Her words might have broken me once, but not anymore. I looked her straight in the eye, the way I used to when teaching her how to ride a bike, steadying her as she wobbled. I've been alone since the day your mother died, I said, and you abandoned me long before this morning. I'm not afraid of solitude, Vivian. I'm afraid of living in a world where I let greed destroy justice. The officers began leading them toward the door. Clinton barked curses, Parkerfield muttered prayers, and Vivian's sobs echoed against the vault walls. I remained where I was, breathing in the cold air, steadying myself against the weight of it all. Morales touched my shoulder gently. Mr. Mallory, are you all right? I nodded, though my chest ached. All right, no. But certain. And sometimes certainty is worth more than peace. As they were escorted out, Vivian glanced back one last time. For a moment I searched her face for remorse, for a flicker of the little girl who once placed seashells in my pocket. But there was only anger, only loss. And in that moment I understood blood might bind us, but it does not excuse betrayal. News travels fast in Savannah. By the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months called with thinly veiled curiosity. Some whispered their support, others their disapproval. By noon, the Savannah Herald had already run a headline: "Local heiress and husband accused of defrauding elderly father." My name was plastered under it, as though my whole life could be reduced to one line in bold print. When I walked to the corner bakery for my morning bread, I felt eyes on me. Mrs. Whitaker, who'd known Margaret since high school, clutched her shopping bag tighter and crossed the street. Yet old Mr. Ramirez, the barber, patted my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Arthur," he said. "Too many kids think their parents are banks, not people." Still, the whispers stung. How could he call the police on his own daughter? Doesn't family mean forgiveness? Those questions followed me like shadows. But I reminded myself forgiveness doesn't mean letting crime go unpunished. 3 days later, I received a visit from Mr. Foster, a senior executive from the bank's head office in Atlanta. He carried a briefcase and the kind of polished smile only money can buy. We sat in my living room, sunlight slanting through the blinds, the vase of Margaret's lilies between us. "Mr. Mallory," he began, "First Savannah Trust deeply regrets this unfortunate situation. Mr. Parkerfield acted alone. The institution bears no responsibility. However, in the interest of goodwill, we'd like to offer you compensation $200,000 for your troubles in exchange for your silence regarding internal matters." I stared at him across the flowers Margaret once loved. "You think my dignity has a price tag?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It's a generous settlement, quicker than a lawsuit. At your age, litigation could drag on for years." I leaned forward. "I spent 50 years making sure numbers added up, Mr. Foster. And right now, your numbers don't add up to justice. Parkerfield couldn't have acted without oversight. You want me quiet. But I won't be quiet. Not for 200,000. Not for 2 million. His smile faltered. He snapped the briefcase shut and left without another word. The backlash was swift. Within a week, local radio stations debated whether I was a hero or a fool. Some praised my courage. Others said I was airing dirty laundry that should have stayed private. The courthouse lawn became a place of gossip reporters snapping photos as I walked up the steps to meet with Charles Benton, my lawyer. Charles reviewed the evidence carefully. "Arthur, this is more than fraud. This is elder exploitation. If we move forward with a lawsuit, you won't just be protecting yourself. You'll be setting a precedent for others." That night, I sat in my study, pen in hand, staring at Margaret's photo. Her eyes seemed to say, "Do what's right, even if it costs you." I picked up the phone and told Charles file it. Sue the bank. Word spread even faster. By the weekend, my porch was piled with letters. Some were anonymous notes calling me a disgrace. Others were heartfelt stories from seniors who'd been pressured into signing away their assets. One woman wrote, "My son made me sign papers I didn't understand. Now I live in a one-bedroom apartment, and he drives a Cadillac. Thank you for fighting back. For every cruel whisper in the grocery store, there was a quiet handshake, a silent nod, a stranger's eyes saying thank you for speaking where we couldn't." But the fight was only beginning. Vivian and Clinton had been released on bail. Their defense attorney gave interviews painting them as loving children concerned about an aging parent's health. The spin was slick, the lies thick. But I had evidence, and more importantly, I had resolve. What about you? Do you think I did the right thing by bringing my own daughter to court? Or should I have stayed silent? Follow this channel and leave me a comment with your thoughts. I really want to hear them. The courthouse in Chatham County stood tall and weathered its stone steps, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. I'd walked up those steps hundreds of times as an auditor testifying in civil disputes, but never like this. Never with my own daughter seated on the other side of the aisle. The gallery was packed that morning. Neighbors, reporters, curious strangers, everyone seemed eager to watch a family tear itself apart. I adjusted my tie, feeling the weight of eyes on me, and reminded myself of what Margaret would whisper, "Stand straight, Arthur." Truth doesn't slouch. When the bailiff called the case, the defendants filed in. Vivian, my daughter, looked smaller somehow. Her once polished suit sagged on her frame, her face pale, her eyes ringed with sleepless nights. Clinton, by contrast, strutted in with a forced bravado, as if pretending confidence might erase his crimes. And behind them sat Parkerfield, the banker whose cowardly silence had enabled it all, his shoulders hunched, lips pressed tight. Then came their attorney, James Mallard, a man whose reputation reached beyond Savannah. Silver hair, perfectly tailored suit, a voice as smooth as butter. He was famous for turning cases upside down, painting victims as aggressors, convincing juries that black was white. The prosecutor outlined the charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, elder exploitation. Each word fell heavy, and I watched Vivian flinch at everyone. Clinton simply crossed his arms. Then Mallard rose, smiling at the jury, like they were old friends. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is not a case of fraud. This is a case of family misunderstanding." An elderly father, 79, struggling with grief and forgetfulness, misunderstood his daughter's attempts to help him. My clients never intended harm. They intended care. My lawyer, Charles Benton, leaned toward me. "Ignore him. He'll twist everything. Our evidence is ironclad." Still, anger boiled in my chest as Mallard continued. He gestured toward me. "Mr. Mallory is a brilliant man, yes, but age spares no one. Memory falters, judgment clouds. Is it possible he simply misinterpreted what he saw? Is it possible his daughter only wanted to ensure his well-being?" I wanted to shout, "No, it's not possible." But Charles gripped my wrist, grounding me. "Patience. Let him hang himself." The prosecution began calling witnesses. First was Caleb Monroe, the young teller. He stood nervously adjusting his tie, but his voice rang clear. I overheard Mr. Hayes speaking with Mr. Parkerfield about Mr. Mallory's deposit box. He said his wife, Mr. Mallory's daughter, was entitled to the assets, and they shouldn't have to wait. Parkerfield said everything would be ready by Friday. The courtroom murmured. Mallard objected, claiming hearsay, but the judge allowed it. Next was Detective Morales. He laid out the sting operation, the forged power of attorney, the forged signature, the footage of Vivian and Clinton opening my desk drawers. Then the most damning evidence, the video from the vault itself. On the screen, projected larger than life, Vivian's voice filled the room. "By tonight, the house will be ours too. And Daddy, the papers say he isn't fit to make decisions anymore. A nursing home in Florida is waiting." Gasps rippled through the gallery. I closed my eyes, hearing the words again, each syllable a knife. When it was my turn to testify, I rose slowly, cane tapping against the floor. I took the oath, my hands steady. The prosecutor asked me to describe what had happened. I spoke plainly, carefully, like I was back at an audit table. "I've lived by numbers my whole life. Numbers don't lie. Neither do facts." The fact is, my daughter forged my signature. My son-in-law broke into my house. Together with Mr. Parkerfield, they tried to strip me of everything I built. And when that wasn't enough, they plotted to declare me incompetent and ship me off to a nursing home. That is not misunderstanding. That is betrayal. Mallard approached for cross-examination, his smile razor-thin. Mr. Mallory, isn't it true that your daughter has often asked you to move in with her family out of concern for your health? Yes, I said. And I always refused. Isn't it possible, he pressed, that you signed documents in her presence and simply forgot? No, I said firmly. I know my hand. That was not my signature. He tried again and again, but every question collapsed under the weight of evidence. Caleb's testimony, the video, the forged papers, all stood like iron walls around me. When the day ended, I sat back down beside Charles, exhausted but certain. Across the aisle, Vivian avoided my gaze, staring down at her hands. Clinton smirked, though sweat beaded his brow. Parkerfield looked like a man already resigned to shackles. The battle was far from over, but one truth was clear: the courtroom wasn't just judging them. It was judging me too. Whether I had the courage to put justice above blood, and I intended to prove that I did. When court recessed for the week, I returned home to the river house, exhausted, but strangely clear. The air smelled of rain and azaleas blooming by the porch. For once, I didn't feel ashamed of the whispers in town. I felt resolved. That night, I sat at my desk with Margaret's photo propped in front of me. Her smile, caught mid-laughter in Tybee Island's wind, reminded me of the vows we made not just to each other, but to the kind of life we wanted: honest, deliberate, dignified. I knew then that I had to make a new vow. Not to my daughter, not to the neighbors, but to the truth. The next morning I called Charles Benton, my lawyer. Charles, I said, I want to rewrite my will. Immediately. He came over with his leather briefcase and a bottle of coffee strong enough to peel paint. We sat in my study, papers spread across the desk like a second battlefield. Arthur, are you certain? He asked. Not even a symbolic bequest to Vivian Courts sometimes look kinder on parents who leave at least something. I shook my head. She tried to take it all already. Why should she get a penny more, even symbolically? No, Charles. Every dime goes where it will do real good. So we drafted a new document, my estate, the house valued at over $2.5 million. My accounts, my securities transferred upon my death to the Margaret Mallory Foundation. Its mission: protects seniors from financial exploitation. In addition, a dedicated scholarship fund for accounting students at the University of Georgia. If I can help even one young auditor keep watch for signs of fraud, then it's worth it, I told him. Signing the papers, my pen didn't tremble. For the first time in years, I felt I'd taken back the future from those who wanted to steal it. But there was more to do. The bank itself had enabled this plot. Parkerfield might have been a rogue employee, but an institution that lets rot grow unchecked is not blameless. Charles slid another folder across the desk. We'll sue First Savannah Trust for negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. They failed to secure your assets, failed to supervise their staff, and nearly allowed forgery to pass through their system. You won't be the only one. I've already spoken with 2 other clients, elderly, both with suspicious withdrawals. They're ready to join a class action. I leaned back, letting that sink in. So it's bigger than me. It usually is, Charles said. But you'll be the face of it. Are you ready for that kind of fight? I thought of Margaret. I thought of the letters I'd received from strangers after the arrest, seniors who'd lost their homes, their savings, their dignity to children, or nephews who swore it was for their own good. My throat tightened. Yes, I'm ready. Word of the lawsuit spread fast. Within weeks, the courthouse was flooded with stories: an old veteran whose niece siphoned off his pension, a widow whose nephew switched her investment accounts without her knowledge. For too long, we'd all kept quiet. Now, silence was broken. First, Savannah Trust tried to fight back. Their lawyers called me a disgruntled client, claimed Parkerfield was a lone wolf, insisted their systems were secure. But Charles had the footage, the letters, and Caleb's testimony. Piece by piece, the facade crumbled. By December, the bank offered settlement terms, $1.2 million to cover damages, and a full overhaul of their security protocols. More importantly, several senior executives, including the very man who tried to buy my silence, were forced to resign. I accepted, but not for the money. I directed the funds straight into the foundation. Margaret's name would live on not as a line on a stone, but as a shield for others like me. That evening, after Charles left, I poured myself a glass of Margaret's favorite sherry and stood on the porch. The river shimmered under the moonlight. Somewhere across town, Vivian and Clinton were preparing for trial, their lawyers sharpening lies. But here in my own home, I felt at peace. Justice isn't quick, Maggie, I whispered into the night air. But tonight I took one more step toward it. And it's for you. Always for you. January brought a chill that cut through Savannah's moss-draped oaks. The courthouse steps glittered with frost the morning the trial reached its end. Reporters clustered outside, their breath fogging in the air as cameras clicked like insects. I walked slowly up the granite stairs, cane tapping with each step, Charles Benton at my side. Inside, the gallery was full to bursting. Neighbors, strangers, even former colleagues from my auditing days, all pressed close to witness what would become of my daughter. I kept my gaze steady, reminding myself of Margaret's words. Truth doesn't tremble. When the bailiff called the case, Vivian and Clinton entered in their pressed suits, but the glamour had drained from them. Vivian's face was gaunt, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder. Clinton kept his chin high, though sweat beaded his temples. Parkerfield, the banker, shuffled in, last eyes hollow, as if resigned to whatever sentence awaited him. The prosecutor presented the evidence again, calm and relentless. The forged power of attorney, the duplicate key request, the video footage of Vivian whispering about shipping me off to Florida. Each piece was a nail hammered one after another into the coffin of their defense. Then came the betrayals within the betrayal. Parkerfield, seeking leniency, testified first. Clinton approached me, he admitted, voice shaking. He said his wife deserved her inheritance early. He offered money if I'd help. I agreed. It was wrong. The courtroom murmured. Vivian's jaw dropped. Next was Clinton himself. Against his lawyer's advice, he accepted a plea bargain. His voice carried no shame, only calculation. It was Vivian's idea, he said, refusing to look at her. She said her father was slipping, that he wouldn't notice. She said if we didn't act soon, he'd leave it all to some foundation. Vivian gasped as if struck. Liar, she screamed, her voice echoing across the chamber. The judge banged the gavel for silence, but the damage was done. The image of a united couple crumbled before the jury's eyes. Finally, it was my turn. I rose from the bench, gripping my cane, and walked to the stand. The room blurred for a moment. I felt every year of my age, but I steadied myself. I never imagined I would stand here against my only child. I began my voice low but firm. But facts don't change because they hurt. My daughter, my son-in-law, and a banker I once trusted tried to strip me of everything: my home, my savings, my dignity. They forged my name. They plotted to lock me away. That is not care. That is theft. That is betrayal. I paused, looking at the jury. Some had tears in their eyes. Others sat stone-faced. We elders are not burdens. We are not wallets. We are not signatures waiting to be stolen. We are people, and we deserve justice. The defense attorney tried one last gambit, painting me as cold, frugal, a man who valued money over love. But each attempt shattered against the evidence. Numbers do not lie, and neither did the footage of Vivian's own words. When closing arguments ended, the jury filed out. Hours crawled by. I sat silently staring at Margaret's photo tucked in my pocket. At last, the jurors returned. The foreman's voice was steady. We find Vivian Hayes guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted elder exploitation. A gasp rolled through the courtroom. Vivian slumped in her chair, hands clutching at air. Clinton received his verdict: 2 guilty on conspiracy and fraud. Parkerfield guilty on forgery and breach of trust. Judge Harmon's gavel came down hard. Sentencing will be delivered tomorrow. Court is adjourned. The room erupted: reporters, scribbling neighbors, whispering, cameras flashing. Vivian was led away in cuffs, tears streaming down her face. She turned once, locking eyes with me. For a heartbeat, I searched her gaze for remorse for the child who once placed seashells in my pocket. But all I found was fury. I exhaled slowly. Justice had been spoken aloud, but the echo of it cut deep. The morning of sentencing dawned cold but bright. A pale sun filtered through the courthouse windows. As I took my seat, Margaret's picture still tucked in my jacket pocket. The judge entered, robes swishing, gavel cracking like thunder. The gallery hushed. Vivian Hayes. Judge Harmon began, her voice steady, for the crimes of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted elder exploitation. This court sentences you to 3 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service, and restitution in the amount of $400,000. Vivian gasped, clutching the rail. She'd escaped prison, but the punishment still struck like a hammer. Clinton was next: 2 years probation and a $200,000 fine. Parkerfield, the banker, was banned for life from working in finance, sentenced to probation and fines as well. The room buzzed with whispers, but I sat still, my cane resting across my knees. This was not triumph. This was grief wrapped in justice. After the hearing, Detective Morales found me outside the courthouse steps. "You did the hard thing, Mr. Mallory," he said. "Most folks look away when it's family. You didn't. You've given others courage to speak up." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "It doesn't feel like victory, Detective, but it feels necessary." In the weeks that followed, the storm of publicity swirled around me. Newspapers called me both hero and villain. Talk shows debated whether I was brave or cold-hearted. Yet letters continued to arrive at my porch, seniors, thanking me for taking a stand, for proving they weren't alone. With the settlement from the bank and the damages collected, the Margaret Mallory Foundation came alive. We rented a small office downtown, hired a staff of 3, and began hosting workshops on financial safety for elders. The first event drew 50 people. By summer, our seminars were standing room only. One woman, gray-haired and stooped but bright-eyed, clasped my hand after a session. My son tried to make me sign papers I didn't understand, she whispered. I said no because of your story. You saved me. In that moment, Margaret's laughter echoed in my heart. Her name was more than stone and flowers, it was living, breathing purpose. As for Vivian, she never visited me again. I heard she and Clinton divorced soon after sentencing. She left Savannah, perhaps chasing a new beginning. Maybe one day she'll see her reflection clearly, but it will no longer be at my expense. I mourn the daughter I thought I had, but I refuse to mourn the truth. The river house feels lighter now. I keep fresh flowers by Margaret's photo, and at night I whisper, "We did it, Maggie. We turned betrayal into something better." The silence answers not with loneliness, but with peace. Sometimes when I walk past the courthouse or see my name in the paper, I wonder if I did the right thing. Then I remember every letter, every handshake, every trembling voice that said thank you. That's my answer. So here I sit, an old man with a cane, and a cause still whispering to the wife who taught me that kindness never meant weakness. If my story has taught you anything, I hope it's this: dignity is worth fighting for, even against your own blood. If my story moved you, please share it with someone who needs courage today. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next story, and leave me a comment. What would you have done if you were in my shoes?